joined by Bill Gertz, national security correspondent for the Washington Times, and Jack Posobiec, senior reporter at One America News. Bill, thanks for hanging over the break. I just want to reset on this real quick because you had a major moment yesterday when the FBI Director Christopher Wray went to the Hudson Institute and really laid out exactly what's going on, the things that you have been saying for a long time, the things that Stephen K. Bannon has been saying for a long time, and a whole host of others. Tell us, how did it come across to you to hear those words from that point of authority, from that place of authority, from the mouth of authority? And do you think the comments went far enough, Bill?
Yeah, I do. I think it was really important that they were able to get this information out. I'm sure that there was pressure from the White House and State Department to say, hey, this is a all-of-government effort to highlight the Chinese threat. The FBI is the most reclusive when it comes to secrecy about its counterintelligence operations. So the fact that they talked about the extensive operations, Wray said that they had 5,000 active counterintelligence cases in the United States. Half of them are related to Chinese intelligence gathering and influence operations. And he said, on average, they're opening a new China case every 10 hours. So this was really amazing to see the extent of the Chinese, what I call the intelligence assault on the United States. We've had bits and pieces of it through the cyber attacks, through a number of cases. We've seen the professors, the Charles Lieber, the chemistry chair at Harvard, was indicted for lying to the FBI about taking Chinese Communist Party money. So this is really a very, very important milestone in the ability of the government to highlight the nature of the intelligence threat from China.
Well, I just want to play some of these clips for the audience. I want to start with Christopher Wray talking about the greatest long-term threat here. Let's roll the clip.
The greatest long-term threat to our nation's information and intellectual property and to our economic vitality is the counterintelligence and economic espionage threat from China. It's a threat to our economic security and, by extension, to our national security. As National Security Advisor O'Brien said in his recent remarks, we cannot close our eyes and ears to what China is doing. And today, in light of the importance of this threat, I will provide more detail on the Chinese threat than the FBI has ever presented in an open forum. This threat is so significant that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State will also be addressing a lot of these issues in the next few weeks.
Bill, this is a real ramping up here, and just before we come to you back for comment on that, I want to play the next clip, which is the 10 hours clip, Chris Wray. Let's roll that one too.
We've now reached the point where the FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours. Of the nearly 5,000 active FBI counterintelligence cases currently underway across the country, almost half are all related to China. And at this very moment, China is working to compromise American healthcare organizations, pharmaceutical companies, and academic institutions conducting essential COVID-19 research.
Bill, this is some extraordinary stuff, and it raises the question, do we even have the resources at that level to be conducting full investigations, launching new investigations every 10 hours? Where do we need to go to ramp this up to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned here?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure Wray was asked about that during the question period, and he was a little bit non-committal in stating, well, Congress should certainly give us more resources. But I think that this period that we're facing right now, the threat from China is so great and so severe that we need to do a major restructuring, as we did after 9/11 when we reoriented our counterintelligence resources towards counterterrorism. I think it's time to make a similar shift towards Chinese counterintelligence and counterinfluence. Again, he went after not just their intelligence operations, but their influence operations, talking about how China co-ops government officials, how they influence policy, how they influence the U.S. media, how they've been able to force the U.S. media to self-censor, to avoid criticizing China or to avoid being blocked from traveling to China. Again, this was extraordinary stuff that has not been made public in decades.
Bill, just before we let you go, you've got a story you're working on at the moment. You've actually spoken to some very interesting people in the last 12 or so hours. Just give us a little insight in what's coming from Bill Gertz.
Yeah, last night at 1 o'clock in the morning, I did a phone interview with two admirals in charge of two aircraft carrier strike groups, one led by the Nimitz and one led by the Ronald Reagan. They're currently conducting joint operations in the South China Sea. Hundreds of aerial flights by warplanes throughout the region. Chinese are trying to put pressure on them, and basically they're just ignored. This is part of the Navy's efforts to declare that the South China Sea will not be taken over by China, which claims the entire waterway, which sees up to $5 trillion annually in international trade, as their private lake. And so this is a very significant operation. Because of the COVID-19, they weren't able to allow reporters to go out on the ship, so they did a brief press briefing for reporters. And I was fortunate enough to get to talk to Admiral Kirk and Admiral Wyckoff.
Bill, when will we be able to see that and read that, and where?
It should be up on the Washington Times later today.
All right, that's fantastic.
Hey, Bill, as a former Navy guy, what was the kind of impression you got from these guys on the ship? Do they feel confident about what they're doing? They feel gung-ho?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely walk softly and carry a big stick. The carriers are the big stick. They're in the waters where China, I asked specifically, what are you seeing in terms of Chinese Navy response? And they said, the Chinese Navy's there. They're behaving themselves. They know if they try anything. We have two carrier strike groups there that could wipe out any attempt to intimidate or possibly take some type of action. There was an incident near Guam not too long ago where a Chinese ship fired a laser at one of our Navy patrol aircraft. So you can imagine that the tensions are pretty high following all of the things that have happened here in Washington, including the FBI director's speech. So I felt that they were very confident, and they were really sending a message, a show of force to China in the South China Sea.